weeks away, and the elect district, roughly 130,000 issues that I'm going to try to dive a little deeper, and inflation relief. Those and two or three of them up in Seabrook. Married for 30 years, but in between I spent engineering, project management, maintenance, operations, technical, a large gamut both in the upstream and the downstream and the midstream. So I understand business. I excelled at business, and I did very well for myself and my family. But more importantly, I took care of the people that were under my charge for those years, ending with a position that had the responsibility of 550 employees, 2,000 to 3,000 contractors, and over $500 million in budget. So I am qualified to be a state legislator and deal with the types of budgets that they have to endure, and certainly am more than qualified on the leadership side. Second career I did simultaneously was in the military as a reserve officer, and when called upon, active duty. I served 28 years in the United States Army. I'm still serving in the United States Army. I have one more year to go before I will retire as a colonel, and I'll retire next year with 29 years of service. I started off in tanks, armor, and then transitioned into civil affairs. I commanded at the company level. I commanded at the battalion level. I've also served 2 deployments, 2 tours in Afghanistan, one as a team chief in 2007 and 2008, in a very kinetic, violent area of the country at that time. And then my second tour as a company commander in 2011 and 2012 up in the northern part of the country, which wasn't as violent, but had its own set of unique challenges. So I understand borders from that. I understand warfare. I understand combat. I understand stress. I think those are all skills and experiences that will serve me well when elected on November 8th to the Texas House. So that's a few minutes about me. I hope you can gather from that I am not a career politician. In fact, this is only my second election. The first one I attempted was as a Clear Creek Independent School District trustee in 2021 for the at-large position. I was not successful. And then a few months later, I filed to run for this particular position, House District 24. And I've been on the campaign trail since December of last year. Let's transition into some issues now, and I'll give you a few thoughts. I'm going to start off with what is classically not a Democratic issue to stump on, which is inflation relief. However, I wish more Democrats would stump on that, because Democrats have some pretty creative solutions that we should be applying to the House and to Austin and to the Senate and to the state, which I probably don't need to tell you is being held by a bit more of the far right Republican world these days, to give us some relief. Look, inflation's real. Democrats didn't create inflation. Republicans didn't create inflation. It was created by a global chain, logistics chain that was put under tremendous stress from COVID and other factors, including the Ukraine conflict, that has created runaway inflation, which is 7, 8, 9%. For the middle class and those that make less than that, who lack discretionary income to begin with, this is brutal. This is brutal. When gasoline was $4 a gallon, when milk has skyrocketed, when the typical goods that you buy from your grocery stores and Walmarts are now 10, 15, 20% higher than they used to be, and your paycheck isn't, that's a real problem. And yet I see nobody, zero, in Austin attempting to provide relief for this. Funny, It's not funny. That's my sarcasm coming out. There's 32 states that have actually rolled out some form of inflation relief to their constituents. And we have not in Texas. And I think that's a shame. I think it's doubly a shame when you consider that we're going to be in a revenue surplus this year. Let me just pick on one tax that happens out there, the oil and gas severance tax. So when oil and gas are pulled up from the ground in Texas, they're taxed, and they're taxed at a small percentage, and that goes to the state budget, goes as state revenue. Well, oil, 2 years ago was in the $40-50 range. Oil recently has been as high as over 100. So you can imagine that just from that tax alone, we're going to have twice the revenue because the price of oil doubled and the taxes off of that new revenue. That's an additional $3, 4, 5 billion that is coming to the state, in which is kind of our money. And why isn't that coming back to us is a question that I have as a legislator or a future legislator, and I look forward to doing something about. Well, Mike, where could that relief come from? Well, the motor gasoline tax could be reduced. That would be a simple one. Or you could reduce the sales tax. You could reduce the sales tax by 1/4 or 0.5%, allow us some break in what are some outrageous prices, and have more buying power, or at least try to get back to the buying power that we used to have 2 years. And yet it's deathly silence and cricket out of Austin on this issue, with one exception. I can assure you that my good friends on the Republican Party will be screaming about inflation and how the Democrats are doing nothing to control it. Well, that might work at the federal level, but kind of doesn't work at the Texas House level and state level when it's run by the Republican Party right now. So I don't see them giving us anything back, and I don't understand why. Now, maybe you say don't give it back for tax relief, put it towards some other programs. That may not be a bad idea too. I don't see anyone talking about that either. But let's talk about some of those other programs where funding could go to. How about education? I stand for high quality public education, the type of education that will enable and allow all of our children to be citizens of our community that we can rely on. Public schools are the backbone of a democracy. They absolutely are. I have seen places in the world where public education is not a priority or is no priority, and they have significant problems. For example, the 2 years I spent in Afghanistan, 50% of the population basically had no access to public education. They had no access to any education. If you were a woman in Afghanistan, by the time you hit about 8, you were gone. You were in the house, you were doing your duties to run the family, and you were pretty much not seen or heard again in society. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy to see so many lives not enriched and not being able to get to their full potential. And it explains on so many levels why Afghanistan is a dysfunctional country. And I can pick on a lot of other countries that have the same view as well. If you're able to subjugate 50% of your population by keeping them from being educated, you're gonna have an interesting worldview that your country will have. And unfortunately, we get to see a lot of that as havens for anti-democracy as well as terrorism. So, is our public education system currently funded to the extent it should be? Of course it's not. It absolutely is not. It's being squeezed by Austin with caps on what the local districts are able to raise through their tax rates and their inability to hold on to that money to provide for quality teachers at a solid compensation, including a full range of medical benefits and cost of living adjustments for their retirement. And none of that happens in Texas school systems, which is a shame. I'm not originally from Texas, as I shared with you. I'm actually from the Northeast, New Jersey, and their school systems are a priority because they make their teachers a priority, including selection, retention, and compensation. And Austin is not doing enough in any of those areas, but instead is spending a tremendous amount of time in reducing the funding that goes to our public school system, while at the same time, for reasons that escape me, claiming that vouchers and charter schools and private school systems are a better way to go. I can tell you, I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't have a problem if you wish to send your kid to a private school, but I don't think you should be paid for it. I don't think you should get a voucher for it. I think our public school systems, the bedrock of our society, is where our focus needs to be. You may say, well, Mike, I don't have kids in school, so why should I care? Well, they're the ones that are going to create the next generation of welders that are going to build, the clean energy grid. They're going to create the next generation of nurses and EMTs that are going to take care of us. The next generation of firemen and firewomen who are going to hopefully keep us safe at night in case we have a tragedy at the house. They're going to create the next generation of public workers that keep our roads going. The next generation of technology workers, businessmen, accountants, cosmetics, designers, artists. I can go on and on and on. Those are the people that are going to enrich our lives every single day, whether you have children or not. It's essential that our school systems create those souls that are going to be great citizens who understand our history, understand civics, and understand how precious democracy really is. So that's where we could move some of that excess revenue. Let me talk about a couple issues that are a little closer to House District 24. One of them is flood control. I don't know about you, but I sometimes wonder in large rainstorms about whether I'm going to make it down to some of these streets around here, a la Harvey, where we had 40 some odd inches on the ground. And I didn't make it down some of those streets. And I'm sure most of you all know exactly what I'm talking about. There is no excuse for Galveston County not to have flood control methods and means by which we can be safe when Mother Nature whips up a storm on us. Now, look, I understand that the coastal spine is a $50 billion project 30 years from now that's got everyone's attention. That is not what I'm talking about for flood control and flood relief. What I'm talking about for flood control and flood relief are the simple things: retention pond maintenance, de-snagging the runoff ditches, making sure our sewers and systems are open and clear. And the people that do that hard work are our cities and our communities and our flood districts. They don't need billions. They need hundreds of thousands, but they don't need billions to do their work. Additional funding needs to go to this critical nuts and bolts, daily blocking and tackling that our towns have to do to make sure we stay safe for flood control. Let's talk about the grid. You know, Texas, if it was on its own, would rank in the top 5 in terms of oil producing nations in the world. And yet the lights go out during the winter freeze. The lights went out in Texas. Unacceptable. I don't want to hear any more about the blame game that it was windmills or solar or this or that. What it was, unfortunately, was a system that had no chance of surviving. Look, ERCOT runs the power distribution and the power generation part of it. They're relatively transparent. They got hammered in this storm because their power generators went down. Why did their power generators go down? Well, in some cases, their power generators went down because they couldn't get natural gas. Why couldn't they get natural gas? No one can answer that. No one can answer that because we don't have a railroad commission who actually controls in any meaningful way the natural gas grid like ERCOT runs the power generation grid. So natural gas was, well, I don't know, it went somewhere. Some of it got exported, some of it went into caverns, some of it got locked in, but there was no method or means by which to move gas around the state to the places that needed it, a la the power generating facilities, so that we could keep the grid up and running. And that's an Austin issue. That is my firm belief. If Austin is not going to control the natural gas grid, I can assure you industry will take advantage of that and come up with their own rules that will maximize their profitability. And I might speak from some of that from experience. So that is how they behave. That's the free market. We can be mad at the industry over that, but that is the rules by which they're playing. And the only way those rules change is for Austin to change them. Yeah, I'm going to change them if I get elected, because the current group of people has no interest in that. And that's a shame. Jobs. There is no reason why Galveston County cannot be a leader in technology and manufacturing and academia and healthcare. They just lack the coordinated vision to create the conditions by which companies and academia want to come to Galveston County and set up shop. We have the natural resources. We have the infrastructure. We have the human talent. We have the land. We have reasonably great weather, except for the hurricanes. But we are in a perfect area to dominate in the area of jobs creation, and yet we don't. And Austin has a role in that. If Austin's going to be too busy playing national politics and not taking care of District 24 by creating the conditions, whether that's tax incentives or anything to try to drive industry and business to want to be in Galveston County, then the jobs will not come. The cities are doing their very best with the resources that they have, but Austin's got a role in this. And you know what? My opponent, being head of the Appropriations Committee, probably could do a lot more for the district that he represents than he has been. Speaking of an area that he excels in is healthcare, because he is a doctor. What about the Medicaid expansion? Why have we not been able to do that? We have 1 million people in the state that are falling through the cracks. The federal government is willing to pay 90, 91, 92% of that gap to get these people the health care that they deserve. And yet, for political reasons, Texas will not accept that. And don't tell me there's not money. I'm going to go back to my oil and gas severance tax example to say we got more than enough money to help pay for that 6 or 7 or 8% and put those people on the rolls. Look, when people aren't on healthcare rolls or on insurance, we're going to pay for it. Taxpayers pay for it eventually through the hospitals, when they can't handle those costs. Those get passed along to us. It's a lot better to do it proactively than reactively. I'd like to spend a minute and talk about common sense gun violence reduction measures. I'm a combat vet. I support the Second Amendment. I own weapons. I am not advocating for people to take weapons away. However, I am fiercely advocating for universal background checks and red flag laws and consequences for homeowners who do not lock up their weapons. And then there's a tragedy that happens because they were negligent in securing what should be a tool that's used either for a job, as in hunting, or for sportsmanship as in target practice. There is no reason why we can't put through Austin gun violence reduction measures, and I will be a tireless advocate for those. I have been on the wrong end of a gun too many times to remember, and I have been on the trigger side of a gun. And I understand exactly what it can do, and there is no reason for it to be used in the manners that they're being used today to create harm to lives. In particular, veterans who use that as their primary methods for suicide, and right now, young people where gun violence has overtaken car accidents as the #1 cause of death. Infrastructure development and investment. Grand Parkway is coming. If you don't know what the Grand Parkway is, think of the third loop of Houston. That's going to be what the Grand Parkway is. And it's going to split League City and Dickinson about where 646 is. It's going to be a 4-lane toll road. What will the Grand Parkway do for Galveston County and House District 24? It's going to change us. It will change us. If you look at what the Loop did and the Beltway did, it changed all those communities. Are we out in front of it? Is it going to be more warehouses? Is it going to be more housing? Is it going to be an academic area? Is it going to be healthcare? Who's going to be vying to be near that outer loop? It's a once in a generational opportunity. And I don't think Austin's taking it very seriously. And if they don't, well, then developers will, and they will let us know what it is we're going to get when that 4-lane road gets open. Is it going to be a noise of traffic whirling by us, going to other places, or will we be part of it and shape our own destiny? I would like to be part of that. Border security. Look, the border is not healthy and has not been healthy for quite some time. We haven't had immigration reform since 1982 when Reagan was president. And yes, I was alive during that. I don't remember when that reform was done, but I think it's long overdue, 40 years, that we should look at that again. I like what candidate Beto is trying to do with guest visas and worker visas and trying to streamline the process. I do not like having the National Guard stationed on the border. I don't think that's a good use of our military. They're not really effective except for taking pictures and being able to tip off the Border Patrol people about what's going on. It's not a great way to spend our military, and I think it's actually demoralizing them. What I do think we should do, though, is I am convinced we need to come up with a group of Republicans and Democratic legislators who get with the Republican and Democratic congressmen of Texas and go to DC and say, Washington, President Biden, Senate, House, we are Texas. We want to work with you to solve the problem. The feds have the national elements of power, economic, informational, diplomatic, military, that can actually influence the Central American and South American countries to stem the tide of immigrants in their own country, as opposed to trying to figure out what to do with them once they get to the border. We are not going to shame Washington into doing something, and yet they hold all the cards. We need to work with them, and yet that doesn't play well on Fox News, I guess. We need to work with them. If we work with them, I bet they would loosen up some of those elements of power and create some really interesting solutions to help stem the immigration tide that is happening at our border. Veterans. Look, as a veteran, I'm passionate about veterans. I also know that veterans are not all in good places. There's a significant amount of mental health issues within our veterans community. There isn't enough housing. There isn't enough help. And they are more apt to be homeless than many other sectors of our population. It's a shame that, our veterans defend the basic rights for me, even right here, to speak my mind and to hopefully represent you. That was off the backs of veterans going in faraway lands defending democracy from other people trying to take it away from us. And yet, when their time is up, they unfortunately more frequently than they should end up in places that they should not be because government services are not there to help them turn into to be better. Women's reproductive rights. I support and want a women's choice, period. I was happy. This is Mike speaking. I was happy with Roe v. Wade as it was. I thought it balanced all of the competing views on how to deal with abortion and women's reproductive rights, where the women had the primary choice up until the part where the baby was viable outside the body, and then the state had a role. To overturn that, I thought was wrong. It's a tragedy. It's an insult to women. Women's choice is the only choice. It's not my choice what my wife does with her body. I will give her my thoughts, her choice. Firmly believe that, and I will